What's good, Raider Nation? Welcome to today's Q&A. Really appreciate you taking part in this. And big news today, no question about it. The Raiders traded Trent Brown. They were able to find a willing trade partner in New England, in the New England Patriots. As a result, the Raiders are able to get out from under the last 2 years of Trent Brown's contract. Not that it was guaranteed or anything like that. So, but the key is that they are going to be able to uh, shave $14 million off of their salary cap. So that's a good thing for them. And as of right now, coupled with the release of Gabe Jackson, the release of Richie Incognito, the release of Marcus Joyner, the release of Terrell Williams, and now the trade of Trent Brown. They have $14 million, or excuse me, $36 million right now under the salary cap. That should grow to another 11-ish, depending on what happens with Marcus Mariota, the backup quarterback. Sorry, I'm certainly trying to get things straightened out here and get these questions as quickly as we can. So $36 million as of right now, going into next year on the salary cap. I would expect that to grow to $50 million pretty soon here. The Raiders obviously have a decision to make on Marcus Mariota. Really, it comes down to they either find somebody to do a trade dance with, much like they did with Trent Brown, or they're going to release him. But the bottom line is they'll be able to recoup $10.7 million under the salary cap. And with everything that's going on right now, with the way the salary cap is going down for the first time in decades, really, every little bit counts right now. So today's move was expected. Obviously, it creates some holes on the offensive line. You go into, as of right now, really the only two starting players that are under contract for next year are left tackle Colt Miller and center Rod Hudson. Other than that, the Raiders have some big holes to fill. Trent Brown, Dave Jackson, Richie Incognito. I have a feeling that Richie Incognito, the door is still open for Richie Incognito to return, but there's no guarantee. So we'll see what happens with the Denzel Good, pending free agent. I have a feeling that's a guy that the Raiders are going to make a priority. But replacing Gabe Jackson, is it John Simpson, the fourth-round pick last year from Clemson? Do they go out in the open market? And so we'll see. A lot of holes to fill, a lot of questions to answer over these next 3 or 4 weeks. So it's getting pretty hot and heavy. We'll go right to the questions. Do you think the Raiders look to tackle in the first round to replace Brown? It's a good question, and that's Dean Sanderson who asked it. A couple things. First of all, I think the NFL does a good job, or did a good job of moving free agency ahead of the draft, but vice versa. So a lot of what they're going to do in that first round pick is going to be predicated on the success they have agency and what holes they're able to fill free agency. As for instance, if they're able to go get let's say a free safety and an edge rusher and an interior defensive lineman in the agency, then that frees them up with that 17th pick to maybe go draft a replacement for Trent Brown. But if they're not successful in some of those other areas during free agency, then they have to go to the draft to look for help along the defensive line and in the secondary. So that's something that you will have to wait and see. Now, the good news for the Raiders is this is a really good draft tackles. And so whether it's even in the first round where there will be a bunch of starting caliber tackles, that 17th pick overall. And I say that because there's quarterbacks in this draft, there's wide receivers in this draft, some good defensive players in this draft. And with the depth at tackle, there's going to be a couple of really good players that drop into that 17th pick range. So that could be a place where the Raiders go early on. But given the depth, you can also envision really good players being there in the second and third rounds too, starting caliber players along the offensive line. So a lot again depends on what happens in free agency. But as we're sitting here today, I would think first pick, number 17 overall. Um, I tend to think it's going to be defense, but now with having to replace Trent Brown, we'll see what happens in free agency. That is where they end up going. So we'll here for some more questions. I'm going to go back to a Q&A that I did on Twitter as well, so we'll get some questions here going. 1 second. And thank you for participating, by the way. Okay, so Dean Sanderson, we all knew Brown didn't want to play for the Raiders. How concerning is it that John Felice seemed to indicate that King Jackson was really happy to be released? In Trent's case, it's hard to it was hard to get a read on Trent Brown. I wasn't in the locker room this year. I got here covering the Raiders for the Review Journal in November of last year. At that time, late November, and by that time he was hurt. Sorry, I never saw him play with the Raiders last season, so he was very rarely around the locker room. So I never got a sense necessarily of where he was mentally with the Raiders. For me to believe that a guy could be unhappy with $37 million the way he collected these last couple of years. But it sure sounds like he wasn't happy here with the Raiders. That's abundantly clear. Some tweets that he sent out, has been sending out. So, be that as it may, that was his impression of the Raiders for whatever reason. It'll be interesting to find out why that might be. Uh, John Feliciano indicating that Gabe Jackson was really happy. Again, not able to be in the locker room last year, really get to know guys a little bit more the way you normally do. It's hard to speculate. But obviously, if John Feliciano is held in with Gabe Jackson, then for something that's happy about as well. So, but hey, I'll tell you this: never bad things. Players weren't happy. That can include a locker room. It's not conducive to a winning organization. Um, now, was there unhappiness related to playing time, related to money? Was it related to personality conflicts? In the case of Trent Brown, I don't. It's hard for me to understand what his beef might be. There's a guy that missed the last of 2019. Then he comes in out of shape to start 2020 with the calf injury that, day one of training camp when they got out on the pads and got out onto the field in Henderson, where's Trent Brown? And the next day, and the day after that, well, he's got a calf injury apparently. Uh, okay, so calf injury happened because he wasn't doing the right way during the off season, and he didn't come in the best shape. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question. Sure was conspicuous. He plays 8 plays of the season opener, then is lost, and then ends up playing 4 games. After that, we all know COVID-19 and kind of a lapse in judgment by him, and that had a compounding effect on some teammates and their availability to practice. It just was a bad year, so I'm not quite sure what his issue is. He was rarely out there, and if he's mad because maybe some coaches were trying to hold him accountable, or uh, you know his feet to the fire, whatever the case might be. I mean, you're getting paid a lot of money. There's expectations when you get paid a lot of money. I've never felt like, if you look back, and I did a story on Jeff Brown, he was never the guy anywhere. He was never the highest paid player anywhere. He was he wasn't the highly regarded guy coming out of college. He was a highly regarded guy coming out of high school. And he signs this big contract with the Raiders, and fact is, when you sign a contract for big money, pressure is on. Expectations come with that, and maybe those expectations wore on him. Wasn't used to it necessarily. So, hopefully he can get things straightened out. He goes to England at the comfort level. Um, he'll play this year at $11 million after restructuring the contract. Um, and we'll see what happens for him. From the Raiders' perspective, I think the right thing for all parties involved was to just move on. And by all looks, he's a happy man that they did. But they did move him, and I think that the Raiders understand, that I mean, you're talking about replacing him. This was pointed out to me this morning. I mean, here's a guy that missed 12 games last year, and the last 4 games of 2015. What are you really replacing? He was never really out there. Hasn't been out for a long time consistently. So, um, I think the Raiders will get that part of it out. But from their perspective, what makes this now so um, the ripple effect is, the Raiders were going into this offseason essentially fix defense, and that was a big part of what they were going to do, right? I mean, the highest scoring offense in the NFL, and the second worst, third worst defense in the NFL. Obviously, it was time to fix the offense. But here's the problem. Now they all of a sudden are looking at not just replacing Trent Brown at right tackle, but Gabe Jackson at right guard, and now Richie Incognito at left guard, although he only played 2 games himself. But then there's his replacement, Denzel Good, is a free agent. So what happens with him? What happens? They're going to be able to bring him back. I would think that they would, and that would be a huge problem solved. But we'll see. It'll be interesting. The times are changing, and you have to kind of get used to this a little bit because with the salary cap down, there are going to be a lot of players, whether it's Trent Brown or Gabe Jackson, um, Terrell Williams. These are players that have shown a level of production over the years, but because of where the salary cap is right now and it's going down, there's a bunch of veteran players that are either pricing themselves out or basically are just are pricing themselves out of their current situation. So, we'll see. Going over to Twitter, looking at the questions, what's going on with Jeff Heath? I think Jeff is owed $3 million coming into next season. I think that the Raiders, no doubt about it, want to upgrade at free safety. He played a pretty decent year. He had 3 interceptions, I think it was. So that's a case where could the Raiders move on and collect another $300 million on the salary cap? Sure. But I think they like Jeff Heath, and they like what they did, not necessarily as a starter, but as a special teams ace and somebody that could provide solid play, in case somebody goes hurt or in a rotation. So we'll see. No indication that they're going to move on to Jeff Heath. I think he's a guy at his cost that adds a little bit of dependability. But Kenny Nauta Kenny now at underscore Kenny Nauta. The Raiders defense was obviously bad, but I think we see big improvement. Yes, Bradley. I do. Big improvement. I don't know. That's going to be some of that's going to be dependent on what they do in free agency, what they do in the draft, but also guys getting better. And you need to get uh, players like Damon Arnett take a step forward. Cleve Farrell needs to continue to take a step forward. He played really well last year. He made significant improvements. Cleve Farrell at the end of the season, top 15 defensive end in the NFL. It's nothing to shake your head at. And I know Raider Nation sometimes has a poor assessment of Cleve Farrell, but I think it's held against him that he was the fourth pick overall. That's not his fault. He wasn't had nothing to do with where he was treated. The question is, can he be a viable piece as an NFL defensive lineman, winning team? And I absolutely believe so. You look at his production last year, his level of play, that fits in anybody on anybody's defensive line. So, but he can continue to get better. I think Jonathan Abram getting better. Corey Littleton getting better, Nick Kwiatkowski getting better. Now, I think combination of that is going to be on those players individually to get better, right thing, like room eating right, um, get their nose in the playbook, all of that. But I also think Gus Bradley coming in and the influence that he's going to have in terms of identifying talent in the draft and free agency to upgrade, certain positions, but then also his development track record, his coaching track record, and teaching track. And it's not just Gus Bradley, although he is he has a track record of success. But keep in mind, and remember the names Ron Milas, the backs coach, and Richard Smith, linebacker coach, and Rod Marinelli being carried over as a defensive line coach. I think, based on people that I've talked to in the NFL, it's a pretty strong teaching, communication, development staff that the Raiders now have in place. And there's nothing better than that. You're talking about a team as young as the Raiders are. So I think that Bradley now being in charge, along with the coaches that he's brought with him, puts us in a good place to get better. And really, been saying this, whether it's on my podcast, Vegas Nation, First and 10 with Sam Gordon, or the radio show that I do, The Huddle, on Raider Nation Radio, or, in these venues and stories that I'm writing. Defense doesn't have to magically turn into a top 10 defense. It just needs to get low 20s, maybe 19, 18, 19 points a game, 20 points a game, rather than 30 points per game. If they do that, they're going to be in a much better position as a whole, to really be a legitimate contender. Let's see, we'll go to Silver State High School, HS football at Silver State, HSFB. Their car had a great year, and there were no fans. That made a difference. I'm incredulous you duplicate it when fans were allowed back into stadiums. Obviously, it helped. Helped all the quarterbacks going on the road and being able to operate the offense without the home crowd making life difficult. But and I think that there will be an adjustment. I've talked about that there's going to be an adjustment that needs to get made um, uh, on offenses and on quarterbacks. But I think that I think they'll be able to. Are they going to score the same amount of? I don't know if anyone's going to. The whole league scoring is going to come down to that. But I think Derek Carr will be. Okay. Let's see. Last question. Who should the Raiders target first in free agents and then in the draft? And this is from it's junior at it's junior ITZ junior underscore '07. I'm going to free safety. Defensive line too. Guys to think about are Dalvin Tomlinson, Budgie Brief, Pittsburgh Steelers, Shaq Barrett from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So defensive line, I think, is definitely a free agent draft. The Raiders have to free safety, getting a quarterback back there. The guy that I've had my eye on and have written about a lot is John Johnson from the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are going to be able to keep him, given all the contract we are dealing with. So somebody at free safety that can take over that position at a high level and also be an asset to the young cornerbacks like Damon Arnett and Javon Mullen, and then allow Jonathan Abram to do his thing as more an in line or in box safety, playing close to the line of scrimmage, where you mitigate his pass coverage. I guess you could say deficiencies, or that's not the strongest suit of the game, but allow him to play close to the line of scrimmage and in the closer area of the field to be able to do this thing. Hey, thanks for participating. Really, really appreciate it. We always like doing this with the fans. Questions, take care, and we will see you down the road.